Okay, today is Friday, April 17th, 2015, and this is DDA Billiard interviewing Dr. Juan Franco. And Dr. Franco is a doctorate, a PhD, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Please go ahead and give me your name and tell me how you wound up in Nebraska.
Okay. My name is Juan Franco, and I'm the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at UNL. It's been a long route to come to Nebraska. I grew up in Fort Hancock, Texas, a small farming community in West Texas, and went to school there. And then I went to a college, a small college in Texas. It's called Sul Ross University in the Big Bend area of Texas. And from there, I went to a master's, and then actually it turned out to be a doctoral program at New Mexico State, and got my doctorate from NMSU. And I was lucky enough that they kept me after I got my doctorate, because as you may know, colleges don't like to hire their own graduates. But in a moment of weakness, they hired me, and I stayed there a long time. And so I got my doctorate and got hired in the Department of Counseling and Educational Psychology. My doctorate is in counseling. That's like now known more as counseling psychology. It used to be called counseling and guidance at the time. But became a professor there, and then a department head, and then associate dean of the College of Education at NMSU, and then associate vice president for academic affairs. And when I was associate vice president for academic affairs, you oversee many programs, and including at the time I was overseeing admissions, registrars, financial aid. And then one day the president came in and said, Juan, you're overseeing these programs that are normally in student affairs. I tell you what, why don't you just take over student affairs in general? And so I did. And it's actually been a godsend, because I still have one foot on the academic side and the other side in student affairs. And so I get to see both worlds. In the classroom, you see students in a very special surrounding, atmosphere. It's a class. And most of us professors think that the world revolves around our class. And, we don't know as much about students outside the classroom. Some are better than others, of course. But in student affairs, I see the opposite side. I don't see them in class. In my role as student affairs, I see them outside of class. Housing, dining services, careers, the union, student government. And so I get to see them outside of class. So I get a better perspective of the students' world and what they're going through. But anyway, so that happened at New Mexico State. And then I actually retired from there and went to Utah State University, where I served for 3 years as vice president for student affairs. And during my third year, I started getting calls from here, from Lincoln. Said that they were going to have an opening in student affairs, and would I be interested? Initially, I said, well, I'm quite happy here at Utah State, not looking. And so, no, not right now, I'm not interested. I'll make a long story short. They called me 5 times. By the 5th call, I said, well, maybe it's meant to be. It's worth looking at. And so I did come for a visit, and just fell in love with it. Fell in love with the campus, primarily the students, and wanted to also, go to what was known as a big name university. And so I did. I came to UNL about 9 years ago, and so I have been quite happy here.
No hurry to leave?
No hurry to leave. No hurry to leave. Yeah.
Okay, you said you grew up in West Texas.
West Texas.
How big a town were you in?
It's a little farming community. The population is called Fort Hancock because, way back when, there were several forts that were built along the river, sort of to protect the people from, they call them Indians then, right? Protect them from the Indians. So we had Fort Davis, Fort Hancock, Fort Stockton, several. So Fort Hancock is where I grew up. And it was like a quarter of a mile from the Rio Grande. Small town, 500. And fact, there were 14 of us in my graduating class. But it was a really good experience because of the 14, I think 12 went to college. And, you know, I really admire what happens in those small towns because everything revolves around, you know, the school. You may have this experience also, I don't know, but...
I went to Lincoln High.
Oh, okay, different setting.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, the good thing about small schools is that you get involved in everything. And so, for example, you know, we're all involved in athletics in the one I played in because there's only a few. In fact, I think there were 96 of us in the total high school, freshman to 12th grade, 96 of us. And so the football team became the basketball team, which became the baseball team, and there was no time to you know, to get in trouble. But, and frankly, there wasn't much to do in a town of 500 anyway. I mean, we didn't have a movie theater. So, you know, for big city stuff, we had to drive an hour to El Paso, an hour from El Paso. But it was a farming community. Everybody knew everybody, and most of the time, the only work that you could get, you know, growing up was in the farms. And so after schools, most of us would go and pick cotton, or in the summer, hoe cotton in the summers. And so it was a really good, friendly environment.
When your childhood family at home, was it a typical nuclear family, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, you, or was there like grandma and grandpa, or?
No, it was just the typical family that we consider that now, I guess. It was mother and father and 8 of us. My dad worked on the railroad, and so he helped build the railroad from El Paso all the way to Louisiana, and they would travel. And so most of the time he spent it away from home. So he would go, and they actually lived in railroad cars. And so he would come home on weekends. Sometimes if they were close by, every weekend. More often, every other weekend. And so my mother raised 8 of us. And so there were 6 boys and 2 girls. But you know, she worked really hard, and it was a pleasant, you know, situation. We didn't have a lot, you know, back then not a lot of people had a lot, and especially in little farming communities, you know. But we enjoyed life. It was fun.
So yeah, I grew up in a family with 8 brothers and sisters. So
Really?
Yeah.
What was the breakup in years? Middle school?
I have to stop and think. Linda, Suzette, Jason, Justin, Mark, Ree, me. About half an hour.
Okay.
About, roughly. Was education a really important thing in your family?
It wasn't something that, you know, was pushed as much beyond high school. You know, both my parents wanted to make sure we graduated from high school. But back at that time, you know, to them, that was sufficient. And in fact, when my dad heard that I wanted to go to college, he couldn't understand why. You get a high school, because he didn't have any formal education at all, right? So having a high school degree, I mean, that was a big step. And so he figured I needed to start working because that's what happened back then. And my mother only went to the 3rd grade. But, you know, she talked to my dad that I needed to go to college. I was going to go anyway, right? And so I did. And then my brothers followed. My 2 sisters did not. One actually still runs a little restaurant there in California. But beyond that, you know, and it wasn't the expectation. I'm a little older than you, Chris. It wasn't the expectation that you would go to college. But in my mind, I was. And it was just, I was. And which is very different now because I've got 3 boys now. And they're a little, you know, early 30s. And like with most families nowadays, that the parents have, you know, some education. It's not a question. I mean, you are going to college. It's just a matter of where. And so, and they did. And they did great.
schools as you, or
No, because by then I had moved to New Mexico, and so they went to school in New Mexico, and that's where I really started seeing the big difference between the very small school and a larger one, because they went to exclusive high school, and that school had like 2,500, right? And so in my schooling, like I said, you played every sport. They are in a bigger school as perhaps the one you went to. I mean, there's only 11 players on the basketball varsity team, so not everybody's going to get to play, right? And so it becomes very competitive. And so they went through that, but then they had a good experience also, they all played football and baseball. They did.
been to Las Cruces?
Have you really? For what purpose?
The Army.
Oh, sure. Holloman?
No, I was Fort Huachuca,
Fort Huachuca.
Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
I had to drive all the way across Arizona,
Lord
New
Stewart,
Mexico,
Yeah.
to Fort Bliss in Texas.
Yeah.
And 35 miles an hour in July.
Yeah.
You're familiar with South Texas and South New Mexico.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Fort Bliss because, Las Cruces is just, 40 miles from El Paso from Fort Bliss.
So, no air conditioning.
We may do it, didn't we? I mean, it's something to do.
Yeah, we did it. I didn't have a choice if I wanted to or not.
Yeah.
in my class, in Mexican American history, there's been a lot of showing that schools that were typically I'm assuming you were in grade school, high school, 50s, early 60s, late 60s, somewhere in there.
Yeah, late 50s and 60s, yeah.
Okay. There was we were kind of shown that there's sometimes a lot of disparity between schools that had primarily Hispanic children in it and schools that were more in the Anglo.
Mm-hmm.
Was this something that you experienced?
Well, my experience was a little different. We did have different school systems, but the one on the where the Hispanics lived, because the community was a little bit divided by there was not there was a section where most of the Hispanics lived, and then a section where most of the whites lived, and it was mostly farmers and school teachers, and so there was a little bit of divide, and so there was where I on the Hispanic section there was a elementary school that went 1 through 6, and on the other side of town there was a school that went from first grade through 12. So that's where the big school was, and so Latino kids normally went through the 6th grade here and then transferred in the 7th grade to the other high school. So at that point they were all together. Interestingly, because I had an older sister, that by the time I went to the 1st grade, she was already in the other school. And so she went to the principal and said, I want my little brother to go to school here. I said, fine. So I went to school in the main school. And so that was my schooling. So I didn't really experience the other schools much.
What, as a teenager, high school, obviously from what you've already said, you were pretty much determined you were going to go to college. I mean, there was no question about it. Did you pick that up more from just family influences? As you said, your father really didn't care as long as you got through high school. He was good with that, and mom kind of pushed for him to buy into letting you go instead of making you go to work. So you were this is the question I have to ask. What did you plan on becoming when you grew up?
I had no idea.
You had
no idea, except I had ambition to do something, and I didn't know what, and I didn't have people that could tell me about the options. I mean, I didn't know. I knew that I was very good in math. I was good in math, and still love math. But I went to school not really knowing what I wanted to do. In fact, the first year I toyed around with a couple of things. Like I thought I might want to be a football coach because I played football. And tried a couple other things, but math kept pulling me back, and so my undergraduate degree is in math. If you had asked me at the time, what are you going to do with math degree? You know, the only thing that came to mind at that time was maybe I'll work for NASA. I'm assuming NASA hires mathematicians, but even then I didn't know, right? And so, you know, I just knew I was wanted to do something and didn't know what.
So, okay, good. Okay, did your parents have different expectations for school between your brothers and your sisters and you?
Not that I know of, other than, you know, it was expected that, or supported that we would go to high school, and for all of us, and then after that, like I said, my dad, you know, preferred that I get to work. But then and in fact, I was the first one in the family to go to college. My two older brothers went to the army because that's what you did there. Either you went to the army or you worked for the railroad, and my dad did. And that was pretty much what we did, or a few of us went to college, right? And my two older brothers went to the army. One was Navy, one was Army, whatever. And then I went off to college, and then my younger brothers went off to college. But, well, I did it, they did it. And my two older brothers who had been to the military, when they came back, they went to college. But it wasn't that anybody was pressuring them, other than maybe me, toward my younger brothers. One of my little brothers, the one younger than me, said he was going to go do something else. I said, no, you're not. You're going to college. That's all I said. You're going to college. But let me tell you something that has always stuck with me, because, in particular for young people who don't have a lot of guidance out of a student of college or which go to whatever. You know, little things that people in roles like teachers, you know, principals, now here professors, whatever. We have to be careful with what we say to young people, because it can have an impact beyond our wildest dreams. And quick example, I mentioned I wanted to go to college, but without much knowledge or direction beyond that. Didn't even know where I was going to go. I'm just going somewhere. And then one day at the beginning of my senior year, us seniors were being cool. You know, as we said, we were outside, we were being cool, all few of us. and the superintendent walks by. I went to the building inside, and he looks at me and says, Juan, you're going to Sol Ross. Okay, I'm going to Sol Ross. And not knowing any better, not knowing about others, I could go to Texas Tech, I could go to UTEC, you know, those schools around. And but he said, you're going to Sol Ross. Now, the connection there was that he was the punter for the football team at Sol Ross, so he had some loyalty to Sol Ross. Right? And so he said, you're going to Sol Ross. You're going to Sol Ross. I mean, I didn't know. Okay. And it turned out to be great. You know, Sol Ross, another small school, but for somebody from a small town, it was an easy transition. You know, in fact, I continued sort of in a small environment because, like I said, I was a math major, and there were only 10 math majors in college. You know, so you know, it wasn't much different. But you know, that stuck with me. That we have to be very careful. Most of the time, it's a positive thing like this one. I didn't know, so we told girls how it was happening. But we have to be careful that what we say is positive, because if you say something negative, it can have the same effect the other direction. And so we just have to be very careful. Yeah.
Like I tell my daughter, she's going to be my engineer. My other one's going to be my lawyer.
Oh, okay, sure.
They're not allowed to date or get married until they have their degree from Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. I saw your cap. I like Notre Dame, no?
And
yeah.
They both told me. Sorry, Bill Lilly.
Notre Dame? You like Notre Dame? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I said so that'll be okay. The University of Nebraska pulls most of our students from Nebraska, of course. and Nebraska's got a lot of little small towns like the one you grew up in. If you could say something to the kid out in Scotts Bluff or the kid down in Crete sitting in a physics class going, what am I ever going to use physics for? None of the jobs I can get around here use this. What would you tell them?
And let me preface my response by saying this, that I think instructors, both in high school and in college, do a much better job now of telling students how they can use physics, how they can use calculus, and what have you. My biggest concern after the fact was that I was a math major, and I took 4 semesters of calculus. And I could work the problems with no idea of what I was going to use that problem for. Why do I need calculus? And so I was good at it, but I didn't know what I was going to. Professors now do a very good job of putting it in context. This is where you use calculus. This is how you compute things, and so make it much more real. And my hope is that that's occurring in high schools as well, so that the students studying physics at least know where physics is used, for what purposes. And then if they're getting that, they have a better direction. The fact is that even in Nebraska, particularly Lincoln and Omaha, we hire all kinds of folks, physics majors, engineers, chemists, and there's a lot for them to do. There is, and so if you go into those fields, the STEAM fields, if you will, I don't think they're going to have a hard time finding a job at all. Assuming if they want to stay in Nebraska. Of course, if they want to be more adventurous and go somewhere else, even better, because they'll probably have more options. The biggest challenge, I think, that we have in recruiting students from the little small towns is that they see UNL as humongous. It's a great university, and I'll get lost, and there are just numbers. And I try to tell them, no. I mean, yeah, we are big. We have 25,000 students. But what happens is we break it down, right? So that there's 25,000, but there's only 4,000 freshmen. They live in residence halls where there's only 50 in their floor with an RA. So in essence, we're talking about a community of 50, and the RAs do a very good job of, at least early in the semester, taking them from place to place as a group. And I don't know what your experience was, but I think they do a very good job of breaking it down. But if they just test it, I think they're going to be just fine, because they have people like me that went to small towns and we try to take care of them, right? But we had a young lady, for example, from Scottsdale, who was hesitant to come here because of the size difference. But she came anyway. And by the end of the sophomore year, she came and visited with me because I kept in touch with her. And she was ready to go to New York City because Lincoln was too small for her. And so, sometimes you just have to give it a chance, right? You have to be a little brave, a little adventurous, and, things work
out. My last question is, if there's one message you would like to tell young people, or even college students of a non-European ethnic background, what would it be?
It would be that, you have to decide what you want, that you have to set your goals high, and that there's nothing or anybody that can stop them except themselves. There's nothing or anybody that can stop them from doing what they want to do except themselves. That there are so many opportunities out there that you just have to take that first step, and then the second and the third, and you'll get there. That all of us, students of all colors, experience critics, potholes, but if the door closes, you go look another, and you keep looking until you get through. Nobody can stop you from doing what you want to do.
That's right. I'm going to stop this. And I'm going to hit save on here because I forgot to do this one time for another interview I had to do. And I felt real bad having to, if you wanted a copy, I was like, I forgot to hit save. And so I'm going to turn this off.
Well, if it's easy enough to get me a copy, please do so.